I don't know where we start. We've had a very, very impressive guest today, Anna Wardley. So I don't know. Explain what you learnt, I suppose, or what your thoughts were with the chat with Anna.
Well, I always, as I'm listening, love to jot down notes and just the things that spring out to me when we're thinking about transferable skills, what people can take from podcast guests and think, well, how could I try and apply that? And the endurance, to want to stick with something, and that grind, that capacity,
It really is,
even when it's tough. So the next one was embracing the challenges and taking them on, and not just in the swimming capacity, but in other areas of her life. She discussed her father's suicide and how that's influenced, and speaking to her previously, through the lunar stuff, that has pushed her to do some of these challenges because, an element of someone who's had a parent die by suicide is risk-taking behaviors. So I can see where, that's formulated. That mental fortitude really came across so strongly because when I was listening and she's saying it's freezing, it's dark, there's jellyfish, there's sharks, I'm
Sharks,
thinking, my goodness, how do you block that out and maintain the focus to go, I just have to keep my arms moving? And there's almost a physical element to it. But she said quite rightly when she was going around that island in Scotland, actually, when the fear got hold of her, her body then started to, come away from that. And that's where you think, blimey. Yeah. So I'm reading a book at the moment, The Perception Effect. I don't know if you've come across it, but it does say how much an important role your perception on situations influences the outcome. And, that really resonated with me there where she was talking about it. And it's a very interesting book around how we frame things and then view it can influence us positively and negatively. So I'd encourage people to look at that. And then the final thing that I thought was really resonated was the trust in others and the personal connections that she's created through these challenges. Having your life in someone's hand.
I was going to say, she's putting her life in someone else's hands,
Yeah, because they have to make that call ultimately. And, for them to also gauge, I think you touched on it through the boxing analogy. They don't know my depths yet. They don't know what I've got in reserve and they're calling me. And, she's got to respect that decision, whether she agrees with it or not. Because that person does have her life in her hands, and if she pushes back too much, they might go, well, all right, see how far you get now.
Yeah,
there's not an element of a kindness. Yeah, go on.
No, but I was going to say, it reminded me, obviously, with the boxers analogy in the corner. But I've seen a few documentaries and programs about. There's this race. I think it's the Race of America. It's called, which is a cycle race from east to west coast, or it might be. I think it is east to west. Anyway, the difference is, I suppose, comparing it to, like, say, the Tour de France, is they don't stop. So the clock's always going. And in that, it just means there's people that cycle for, like, days without stopping and without sleeping. And it's the same sort of thing. They have a support crew. But in the thing, you see people, like, attacking, like, their support crew, punching them just because they say, like, you need to stop, and they're like, no, I'm not going to stop. And it turns into, like, it's horrible. And I don't get the impression it's quite to that extent with the swimming, but there will be a stage, like, and I think to some degree Anna kind of, I'm not saying she brushed over it, but there must be occasions where in the moment where she thinks, like, she isn't in agreement maybe with her team. I don't know. But I think after, obviously, she can see that she, like, especially the example, like you mentioned in Scotland, she can be under no illusions that was the best thing to happen. But there must be that split where she says, I'm not getting out kind of thing. It just must be so difficult.
Well, I've seen some of the images because she puts them in her presentations when she's at conferences. When she's got out, and you can see how it's affected her physically. She looks a different person completely because, she's got one of those silver blankets, looks like tinfoil. And she's in a really distressed situation. So I imagine there is that little bit of gratitude, that gratefulness that someone has made that decision and taken it out of her arms. Because I think, like she touched on, if someone's been awake for 24 hours, hallucinations could start to play a part.
Oh, easily, yeah.
There'll be times where she may experience, otherworldly experiences in the water, and having someone else who's just taking that decision out of your hands, to say, you've done enough now. You can be proud of what you've done and achieved, and there's always another day to come back and go again. And I think,
exactly, yeah.
Doing the channel, and 2 years later just shows that. So for me, guests like her just show anyone, because that's the biggest thing. She probably wouldn't. I don't know if she'd classify herself as a no one in certain ways, but she's an everyday person who's suddenly gone, I want this challenge. Yeah, she'd done the Clipper race just before, which obviously circle of friends had pushed her to think, I can do more, I can achieve. But it goes to show you're only limited by your own mindset.
And, massively,
how much you then push to achieve the things that you want is within your own gift. And that's what our guests keep telling us over and over again in their stories. So it's amazing to listen to them. And I think people, again, will get so much out of this one in relation to, digging in, not giving up, making sure you overcome, and the logistics and operational side of it as well. You just think amazing. So for me, people will get so much from this one in relation to all those things we've mentioned. And I really do hope they feed back to us, Dave, and say, you know what, guys, thanks for putting this one on, because Anna was very impressive, and she's stimulated me to go out and achieve my own challenges.
Yeah, I agree totally. And if you end up swimming in the World Ice Swimming Championships after this, let us know. Because I'm not going to be doing that, I have a feeling. That's the thing.
No, I've got my own challenges to take on, and it's not the swimming one.
Yeah, just not the World Ice Swimming Championships, I'd say. So, all right, well, let's let Anna tell her story then. Hi, Anna. How's it going?
Yeah, good, thank you. Good to see you both.
Can I just congratulate you on of all the guests we've had, you have had the best positioning of a logo or anything, linked to our guests that we've ever had. People kind of don't get it quite as good as that. It literally is just over your shoulder. It's incredible.
That's my
You've done this before.
In, PR and spending a lot of time making sure people's logos are visible, and that's my past life coming out there.
Well, we might touch upon your past life, but I know one of the things that I'm interested in finding out more about, but I know many of our listeners will be, is your swimming. There may be people that have seen you online and all the things you've been doing, but how did you start doing this? Well, I say swimming, but the type of swimming you did. Do you want to explain a bit more if someone hasn't seen you already?
Maybe I should explain, because it isn't kind of ordinary swimming that I've done, really. I describe myself as an endurance swimmer. I've done a lot of swimming in very cold water, in some like really extreme environments, and I've done some really long swims as well. I started out, my first challenge was that I wanted to swim the English Channel. I kind of captured my imagination, the idea of swimming from England to France, this kind of idea of swimming from one country to the other, and just that one thing led to another. And then I ended up doing various other swims. I swam the Strait of Gibraltar from Spain across to Morocco. I swam from Europe to Asia across the Hellespont Strait. I swam around various islands. So some swims in excess of 24 hours. So I've done some really kind of long, grueling swims. And I don't quite know how it happened. Like all these things in life, one thing led to another. And when I decided to swim the English Channel, I couldn't swim front crawl. I taught myself to swim front crawl at the local swimming pool in my lunch hours. And I was 30 when I started swimming. So it all
That's
I was a late
incredible.
starter. I know you talk to people about how kind of maybe they make changes later in life,
Yeah.
and for me, swimming was something that I came to pretty late in life, but it was just a real game changer for me.
Well, we'll share your website in the show notes. Just looking at the list of swims you've done and where they're located, it's incredible. Like I say, a bit of me's like, it's scary looking at the list, but then also it's just so impressive. Like the diverse range of places. Like, I'll be honest, if I was going to be doing these sort of length swims, I'd be doing it Caribbean maybe. But then you've got like, you know what I mean? You're doing it in like you say, the English Channel, not the warmest. You've got even the Strait of Gibraltar can't have been that warm, I don't think. But yeah, it's an amazing list of places that you've done this.
It really is. I think it's such a like incredible experience to not only doing the swims but planning the logistics for
Yeah.
some of them. You know, some of them nobody had done before. One of the trickiest ones was swimming around Portsea Island. So not everybody knows. I know Simon will know the city of Portsmouth is an island, sits on an island. And yeah, I swam round it, set a record as the first person to circumnavigate Portsea swimming and just getting the permissions to do that. You know, it's swimming through the, past the naval dockyard, the continental ferry port. You know, they're not so keen on people swimming down there for security reasons. So it took a long time getting all the permissions and police escort boat, and it's a huge undertaking, and that teamwork, pulling together the team with this kind of common goal, it's quite addictive actually. And then traveling to different parts of the world to do the swims. One of the last major ones that I did before I became a mum in 2020 and 2019, the year before, I swam the Catalina Channel in California. So that's from the island, Catalina Island, to Long Beach, just north of LA, and just phenomenal to swim. I swam it through the night. It's an area that's renowned for great whites. So, there's
I
a
was
lot of
going to say, that's what
yeah,
I
you
was
lead
thinking
up
when
to
you
that
said that. Yeah.
swim. So many people. The year before, they'd had more sightings than ever before in history. I think the theory was, with the rising sea temperatures, they were coming closer into shore. So everyone was telling me that, and it's such a personal test, really, of your mettle. Getting into the water in the pitch black night, and knowing you're going to swim through the night, and you have to do that swim. It's a kind of cruel one in a way, because of the meteorological conditions. It basically gets windy in the afternoons off the coast of California, so you need to start basically late at night to make landfall before the wind picks up in the afternoon. And so you're essentially swimming across there through the night. And I think my swim was about 19 and a half hours. It was a pretty tough, and you get this huge temperature drop when you hit the continental shelf, where the water temperature drops by about 10 degrees. So literally from one stroke to the next, it's like going into an ice bath. And yeah, it's amazing the challenges that Mother Nature throws at you when it's just literally you versus nature, really. I'm in the water on my own. I'm swimming under international marathon swimming rules, which is basically a regular swimsuit, a swim cap and goggles, nothing else. So there's no wetsuit, no fins, none of this stuff that would make life a damn sight easier. And people always say it's like as if you make it as difficult as you possibly can.
I was going to say, yeah.
There is an element of that. It's like really testing yourself to the absolute limit. It's like people can pass food and to you, and of course you need to refuel when you're swimming for 19 hours, but they can't make any physical contact with you. And that's it's psychologically being alone in the water, swimming through the night is a massive psychological challenge, over and above what your body's physically going through.
Simon, are you tempted to join this world of
I think once
swimming?
I might be able to do a couple of lengths at the local pool to get me going, but it sounds like that's where Anna started, so I think that's the inspirational thing I'm taking here. You suddenly got it into your mind, I want to take on a challenge. You taught yourself front crawl, and said, right, that's the first step. And then, what immediately sprang to my mind is, how the hell do you build a team to sort out the logistics of these things, because like you said, it sounds like there's a lot of work that I'd never considered actually before. You see it on the news usually, don't you? Someone swam the channel, there's a boat going across, and have a short chat with them on the sofa at the end. But what's the sort of build up to an event happening then? How many people need to be involved usually?
It very much depends what the swim is, and there are some swims that are like really established swims, and the English Channel is a good example. So the English Channel is established as, some people refer to it as the Everest of swimming, and a lot of people from all over the world want to come and swim the English Channel. So there's a whole kind of industry set up around that. You hire a pilot boat, a channel pilot, you book a slot with them, and the pilot essentially organizes the logistics. You essentially just need to turn up for your window. And it's not cheap, you pay several £1,000s for, to book your pilot, but it does mean that side of things all organized. If you decide that you want to swim around the Isle of Wight, for example, when I did that in 2013, there are only 3 people who've done that previously, and the last person was 30 years prior. There's no kind of setup there. There's nobody you can go to and say, hi, I want to swim around the island. Can you organize that? You need to organize everything yourself. So that's everything from, the support vessels, the support crew, organizing the permissions, doing all the training swims. And I swam each sort of sector around the island multiple times to work out the tides and exactly what time, I needed to start and where. So it's like, it literally is months and months and months of planning. But what is amazing, how when you're on a mission like that, how just all the right people appear. It's incredible. It's like you build this momentum, and there's like such a positive energy surrounding the whole thing. We were raising lots of money for charities that like are really close to my heart, so there was a lot of kind of positive energy around that, like a real sense of purpose. And I think that's quite infectious, and people really want to be involved and be a part of it, especially when it's a world record attempt and you're out to do something that's never been done before. It's incredible just how generous people are with their time and expertise. And I am lucky that I used to work in the marine industry, so I've got a lot of contacts of people that work on boats or have got boats. And so when it came to planning these swims, pulling the teams together, I had that kind of on my side. But it's tough. It's like I always say, that's actually the biggest part of the challenge, is in that kind of relentless training and preparation. And I think that's, if it was just purely down to the kind of physical and mental sort of strength focus to get in and swim round, I actually think a lot more people would do it. But actually dedicating more than a year in the planning and preparation and all the self-sacrifice that comes with that, and the financial investment, I was lucky that I had a sponsor at the time when I was doing all those swims around the different islands, and that helped. But it's huge. It's a huge undertaking, and it's not for the faint-hearted, you know. It can lead to a lot of stress, you know, in the lead up to doing something like that. You've put yourself on the line. You've said you're going to do it, and you've done that in the public domain. And there's a lot of pressure that comes with it as well.
But with, obviously, you mentioned swimming around the Isle of Wight. I'm not saying that is not very hard. What I mean is, I'm not saying it's hard. It's not hard to organise that, but that's on the south coast of the country you're in. How do you organise swimming on, like, if we take the Catalina Channel one, like organising a swim in another country, you know, fairly far away, on the southern bit of California, like that's a bit different, isn't it?
Yes, you tap into the networks, and it's amazing. Once you get involved in these worlds, there's a whole network of people like me all around the world doing.
So there's more of you then out there.
So there I was thinking, you know, like, this is just me. And then you start going and doing these swims, meeting other people. And actually, the Catalina Channel is another of the kind of iconic channel swims in the world, where, again, there's a federation that oversees the swims, and there's a few different boats that pilot. So, again, you have to book your slot. But it's more straightforward in that you book the pilot, and the pilot deals with all the logistics. I've got to admit, I actually prefer it when I've, with my own team, organised logistics, because for me, that's such a big part of the adventure, and understanding, like, kind of just understanding more about the swim and not just getting in and swimming. So part of my 5 Island swim challenge, I attempted to swim around Tyree in the Hebrides. And so Tyree, you might have heard it on the shipping forecast, the Tyree weather station, and it's the most outerly of the inner Hebrides off the west coast of Scotland. And it's famed as being the windiest place in the British Isles. It's surrounded by dangerous reefs. The water's famously cold, and, you know, lot of challenges. And when I decided that I was going to attempt to swim around, it's 30 miles to circumnavigate the whole island. And when I said I was going to do it, like, we went up there for a recce. I'd been working up there on the island at the windsurfing championships, and the windsurfing championships were a complete write-off because there was no wind. So I saw the island. It looked like a Caribbean island, you know. It was August, flat, calm, white sandy beaches. And so when I spoke to the locals and said, I'm going to have a crack at swimming round Tyree, they all thought I was absolutely crazy. They were like, you do realise this is the windiest place in Britain. We've got all these dangerous reefs. We've got, you know, it's so cold. And when I told them I wasn't going to wear a wetsuit, they thought I was even more crazy. But I went up with a small team, and we spent a week there kind of on a recce, and we went and we met with loads of local fishermen, and we'd sit with them, you know, over a whiskey, and they'd be showing us the charts and, like, pointing out where the reefs were. They still thought I was completely barking mad. But I went up for the attempt, and I was actually swimming for 16 and a half hours, and I was pulled out. I'd done about 22 of the 30 miles, but it was so cold. Basically, it was August, which was when the water was at its warmest, and it was 12 degrees. And I'd been in the water for like 6.5 hours, and I was just shaking, and my jaw was chattering so much that I couldn't breathe properly. And of course, when you're swimming, the most important thing is, you know, that you can breathe. Well, actually, at any point, never mind when you're swimming, it's actually quite mission critical. And I just got to a point where my body was just closing down, and there were also lion's mane jellyfish anywhere. I don't know if you've ever come across lion's mane jellyfish. Yeah. It's funny. It's an interesting thing. In the lead up to the swim, a lot of people had told me, oh, you know, there's basking sharks up around Tyree in the summer. They all come in close to shore. And I'd got myself worried about the basking sharks, even though I knew they're completely harmless, just because they're enormous. You know, they're the size of a boss, you know, a single boss. And I thought it's going to give me the fright of my life when I'm swimming along in this really clear water if I'm suddenly confronted with this absolutely giant beast. So I'd been watching all these kind of nature documentaries about basking sharks just to kind of get over this fear. And then it transpired when we got there, the basking sharks weren't around, but the water was just thick with these lion's mane jellyfish, which of course posed a far greater threat to me because, you know, I know people who've been rendered unconscious, swimmers, when they've been stung multiple times with these. They're the ones with the like long trailing tentacles. They're kind of like purple brown, like spongy big things with these very long trailing tentacles that can be like 10 feet long. And they're just brutal, horrible things. And I think what happened was after 16 hours of swimming in this really, really cold water, I'd managed to kind of just dodge them because it was so clear and I could see where they were. And it was nightfall, so the light was faded. And I think I knew I wouldn't be able to do that anymore. And I would just be swimming into them because I wouldn't be able to see them. And I think that affected me psychologically, you know, the fear factor. And it's like, until that point, I was managing to withstand the cold. But I think once that fear engulfed me, the sort of shaking response that I was getting from the cold and my ability to keep swimming was just, you know, my team was watching and my stroke rate was just getting slower and slower. And it's just dangerous territory. Then.
I was going to say, like, we've had a previous guest on, is a boxing trainer and works in boxers' corners. And I suppose it's a bit like that concept where does your team have to kind of take control, or would you just keep swimming till it's too late?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting, fascinating relationship really you have with your team in this situation. And in a way, when I get in and start swimming, I am so single-minded in my focus, which is to keep swimming until I get to whatever the point is, whether it's the other country at the other side of the channel or to complete my loop of the island. And I'm so badly placed as the swimmer to make any decisions about my well-being, especially when swimming in cold water, because as the body temperature drops and you start to go into a hypothermic state, the mental processing really, really slows, and the ability to make kind of coherent decisions really reduces. And it's actually quite dangerous. There comes a point where you go from feeling like bone-shatteringly cold to this kind of almost like this warm, fuzzy feeling. And it's the start of the onset of unconsciousness, essentially. It's the body, it's what happens to the body as you're losing consciousness, I guess, to make it less unpleasant as an experience. And when you start feeling like that, it feels nice. Like it sounds, it's probably hard to imagine that in this absolutely freezing cold water where you're in a state of fear that you get this like lovely warm fuzzy feeling. But that is a real danger zone when you're in that. That's when you definitely don't want to be on your own. You know, it fills me with horror when I hear people talking about going for long swims in cold water on their own because you just you're not in a position to make a kind of decisions about your welfare and safety. So I'm relying on my team to be really closely monitoring me. And of course, they know that I'm going to be pushing myself really, really close to the limit because to set records, to do these really challenging swims where I'm in cold water for such extended periods, it's clear that I am going to be, affected by the cold, and so it's inevitable. I'll have I'll slow right down in terms of my mental functioning, but it's knowing where that line is, where it's no longer safe and they've got to pull me out.
How do you react though to when your team pulls you out? Because I suppose that's why I was drawing the analogy with the boxing corner where they throw the white towel in. Not every boxer appreciates that kind of intervention. Do you take it well, or is it a bit of a tense 15 minutes?
Yeah, I 100% respect their decision, because I know it's the hardest thing in the world for them to do. You can imagine, like, I've been training, with this sort of single-minded focus for months and months and months, getting up before dawn, training for hours before I work, making all these sacrifices. No one wants to be the person to say,
no.
Oh, let's call it a day, Yeah, I know that they would only be doing, and we have an agreement, and that is they will only pull me out if it is life-threatening, imminently life-threatening, the situation. So they would never pull me out if they thought it was going to take 12 hours longer than anticipated, or I look really tired, or they want to get to the pub for last orders. Like, clearly none of those reasons are going to cut the mustard. They will be getting me out, and it's very, very rare that it's happened. I can count on one hand. And they do that because they believe if I stay in the water, it will result in my death. It's that clear, the line. So when they say to me, get out, there's no way in the world I'm questioning that, because I know that it's based on that criteria. And who on earth, it's such a massive thing to ask of people as well, to make that call. I would hate to be in that position for someone else. I'd find it so hard, because how far do you let someone push themselves? And especially when they have questions that they ask me. So I stop to feed every 30 minutes on a long swim, and it might even be every 15 minutes towards the end when I'm kind of really depleted and exhausted. And they'll ask me things like simple arithmetic. So they might ask, like, what's 2 + 3? What's your postcode? What's the name of your dog? These sort of questions. And it's incredible how long it can take me to answer. It's like I've slowed right down. But they're also looking out for things like my stroke rate really slowing down. That's a sign that I'm going downhill. They know exactly how many strokes I normally do. So as that slows down, it means that I'm not keeping my core temperature up. I'm not generating heat by swimming at my normal temperature. So they're watching all these things and then making decisions based on that. But it can be painfully, difficult for them. And then for them wondering, there's never been a situation where we've looked back and said, oh, you ought to have left me in. Like, on most of these occasions, I've, ended up in hospital afterwards. After my first channel attempt, I was blue lighted to hospital. I was pulled out of the Menorca channel. I lost consciousness as soon as they got me on the boat. That's when I'd been stung all over by jellyfish I'd been swimming for 10 hours, and it was thick with jellyfish, and I'd just been stung so many times that the toxins in my body essentially overwhelmed my body, and I lost consciousness. So then I was transferred to hospital, so there've been pretty extreme situations where they have got me out, and I'm eternally grateful, because I probably wouldn't be sat here now had they not pulled me out. It's a tough game. It's
a very tough game.
It's not for the faint-hearted. I think I said that.
I was just going to say.
It really isn't. It's a really delicate balance between, people talk about, pushing beyond your limits. And there are elements of, it's healthy boundaries about your safety are important. And actually handing that over to another person is complex. It's a really complex kind of thing to ask of somebody. And we always have on the team, it's always really clear that one person has that role of, if the situation arises, to you basically pull me out, that it will be one person telling me that, and that there won't ever be any, for me as a swimmer, if I was getting conflicting, like information, and one person was saying that get out and someone wasn't, it's so important that like chain of command within so they might have their own debate about it between themselves, but that would never be within my earshot, and then I would just get a really clear instruction from the person that I'm expecting it from, and then I would follow it. And the rule is, even if I didn't agree with it, you argue with it. You argue about it afterwards. Once you're in the boat and safe, because for all I know, they could be telling me to get out because I'm being circled by a great white that I can't see, or there could be a vessel on a collision course that they can't establish communications with. And you don't want to waste time having a conversation or argument about it. I just need to know that they're getting me out because my safety depends on it. And then once I'm out of the water, we can talk about why and what and wherefore. But it can be a really hostile environment out there, and there are things that can pose really real, imminent risk to your safety, and they're the ones with the whole oversight. And it's also the reason that my crew, when I'm doing really long swims, they're on a watch system. So they're, doing 4 hours on, 4 hours off, so that they can rest and eat and go to the loo. And that when they are kind of on watch and they're looking after me, they're completely, got the clarity of mind to do that. Because I don't want people who've been on watch for 24 hours and, they're hallucinating or nodding off. I need them to be completely, with it. So I'm the only one in the team that doesn't have someone on a watch that can relieve me.
You just stick to swimming and avoiding sharks. So, it's not that easy, I'm thinking.
All I need to do is just keep my arms going round and round, which you've got to admit is not exactly complicated, is it, in the grand scheme of things?
When you were talking through that, Anna, I wrote down mental fortitude. How do you prepare? Because it's like any elite performer, anyone who pushes themselves to the absolute limits. You can't do that in training per se, I don't think. It has to be in the midst of those moments where you find out the depths of your character, where you can go. And I imagine over time at different swims, you've probably gone beyond where you were before. So if someone's considering this, what sort of things, build or develop mental fortitude? Because I imagine there is a bit of suck it and see to find out as you go.
It is. I think you don't know. You don't know what you're capable of until you get out there and do it. If we'd met and had this conversation when I was 29, I would have said, there's no way in the world, that I can't do that. I wouldn't have been able to imagine what I did, what I went on to do. And I think it was this incremental development of kind of confidence through, doing smaller things that kind of lead on and on. I didn't get straight in and attempt to swim the English Channel. I swam around Brownsea Island in Poole Harbour, which I think is 6 miles, which at the time felt like absolutely like the most gargantuan.
That does sound a lot to me at the moment.
Everyone said to me at the time, I can't believe you can do the half distance or the full. So I think it's 3 miles or 6 miles, something like that. And then you can choose wetsuit or non-wetsuit. And of course I chose non-wetsuit full distance. And everyone was like, you must be mad. Do the half distance and do it with a wetsuit.
Yeah, that sounds like...
But it was like kind of building up, like I managed that. And I remember being at the start of that swim. I'd never done anything like that before. I finished so long after all the others. This poor guy who was allocated to kayak with me, you know, all his mates had gone home a couple of hours ago, and I was still, you know, kind of slogging along. And I remember at the start, I'd heard somewhere that swimmers covered themselves in goose fat.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'd gone
I was
to
going to ask about that.
Yes, so
I
I
think
went
it
to
must be from watching
Waitrose.
like Blue Peter or something.
Yeah, I'm afraid to pop the bottle. It's not true, but I didn't know that at the time. And I went to Waitrose and I bought a jar of goose fat. And I stood at the start. It was a really sunny day, and I had it in this bag, and I was like rubbing it on myself. And some of the others were like, "Oh, what have you got there?" I was like, "Oh, it's goose fat." And so everyone else was like putting it on, and 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 I had no clue what I was doing. I'd just like heard something. Lanolin is the thing, if you're interested. It's
Right.
sheep's wool fat, and it's a myth that people think that it keeps you warm. It doesn't, but it stops chafe. And one of the biggest enemies for a swimmer, a sea swimmer, is chafe. You know, when your skin rubs against itself. We worked out when I swam around the Isle of Wight, I did 87,000 strokes. So that is a lot of time to have this contact, this friction in salt water.
Yeah.
And so if you don't have something to protect from the chafe, you can just end up with like open, you know, wounds essentially, which can be a showstopper. So, but I think that mental fortitude, and it is mental fortitude, you know, people sometimes kind of look at the things I've done and think it's kind of like physical prowess, you know, it's some kind of like being some sort of superhuman physically. It really isn't. You know, anyone who knows me will know that I am not a natural athlete at all. You know, I was classically the last person always to be picked in, you know, at school for any sport. Well, in fact, I was never picked. It was like I was the one left on the bench that they used to argue about who would have to have me. And, you know, it took me, you know, the best part of 30 years to find my forte. But what I realized was in the water, mental strength counted for so much more than the sort of fitness, you know, if you're doing some other sports. Yeah.
Because I know that you do public speaking in a variety of different places. So after you've given these sort of conversations that you're sharing with us, because I don't know if they ever ask you to talk about this women, they'd be daft not to, in my opinion. But what sort of things do they ask you? Because I imagine corporations who are trying to help people build resilience, that never say die attitude. What sort of information do you try to pass on to them? You know, they're trying to apply it in a corporate setting, which is so far removed from swimming through jellyfish and getting stung in freezing cold waters. But what sort of things do you try and help that's transferable?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Because I suppose it's that transferability, because I know that you've set up your own company as well, and that's inspirational. We'll get to learning more about that soon. But when you do your public speaking, were you a natural public speaker, or was it another thing that you had to do? Right, let me suck it and see. I'll get in front of people and see how it goes.
I think there's an element of fake it till you make it.
Right,
and what happened with me is that I guess I've always been a little bit of a natural storyteller. And when I started doing these swims, I started being invited because they, you know, I was in the local media. There'd be stories about the different swims I was doing. And I started to be invited to start off with. It was like Rotary clubs, the WI, you know, the local infant school, that sort of thing. And I was doing that for a while. And then I'd get recommended, someone from the Rotary would recommend me to some company where they used to work. And then I moved more into the corporate stuff. And I think it is so, like, in one way, it sounds really what I do, what I've done sounds like quite unusual and unrelatable, but actually so much of it is so relatable. You know, it's about setting your mind on doing something and not giving up, like going back. I've made unsuccessful attempts to do swims, like my first channel attempt when I ended up in hospital, and then I found it in myself to go back 2 years later, train, prepare, and do it, but those things that you bring away from that are so applicable to whatever the challenge is that you're facing, because it basically is about facing your fear, stepping outside your comfort zone and really digging deep and kind of not giving up. It sounds cheesy, but actually doing that and practicing it, it's like building a muscle, because the more you do that, the more you realize your potential is, and then you can apply that. I set up my own business, Seagrass Communications, and so I was then running an international PR and event management company. Thus the placement of the logo. But and I think I had confidence to do that because I knew that I'd faced some of the toughest situations and survived. And so being in a boardroom or a tricky pitch or dealing with a difficult client, it kind of feels like small fry, when you've been in the water like jellyfish for 10 hours, you can sit and you can kind of just think back to some of the situations that you've been in, and that it's shown you that you have got this kind of infinite ability to cope with difficulty and challenge. And I get so many people say, oh yeah, but I couldn't do what you've done. And I really believe that I honestly believe anybody could do what, not everybody wants to. I think that's maybe where the difference, the differential is not everybody wants to kind of make that sacrifice and have like all the other areas of life that are really rewarding and valuable, that for a period I didn't have any time or capacity to participate in, because I was single-mindedly focused. But what exists within me and my mindset is something that is there within everyone. It's whether you switch it on and use it, and it's a self-belief, but you have to exercise the muscle really to get it operational.
I think that is a good way to look at it, because as you say, it's using that muscle, so to speak, and then once you start using the muscle, I suppose it's like moving like a heavy ball. To get it moving is the hardest bit, but then it just keeps rolling once you've got that momentum, and then it just keeps going. But I suppose I'm speaking from my listening to what you're saying and all of the things, I still keep coming back to great whites and jellyfish. I suppose
I'm thinking nightmares, aren't I?
Yes, exactly. I like the way you were more. I like the way you were more bothered about basking sharks. Like, if I would take basking sharks over great whites. Do you know what I mean? I'd happily swim with the basking sharks. That's not a problem. But the great whites, maybe less so. I don't know.
I'll give you an interesting fact about great whites, and this is something about like doing your research and preparing is so important, because I found out that in the year before I did the swim, there were globally in the whole world, there were 7 fatalities with shark attacks, 7 humans killed by sharks. In the same period, there were 10 million sharks killed by humans. So does it make any sense whatsoever for me to be fearful getting in the water? Like, to me, if you rationalize that and the risk, it would be like getting in your car to drive to work and being consumed by fear that something so random is going to happen. Not even, I'd say it'd be far more likely, a telegraph pole falling on your car is infinitely more than, that. So I think there is something about and that is about controlling your mindset and your fear. And I did let my fear run away with me. In the lead up to that swim across the Catalina Channel, so many people were bringing it up. I did some media interviews in the days leading up to it. It was all they wanted to ask me. It's like, aren't you terrified about the great whites? And it started to affect me to the point that when that night came and I had to climb down the ladder, it was 10:15 at night. It'd been dark for about an hour and a half. So I knew the whole of the night was ahead of me. And I was literally climbing down this metal ladder into this like inky black sea. And everyone had told me, oh, you know, their feeding time is exactly the time you're getting it. And I'd managed, and for me in that situation to overcome my like physical responses to the fear and actually manage to climb in, put my head down and start swimming was huge. It was huge, you know, like, and you know, I'm not claiming that I was, you know, in some way above all this fear and just got in and got on with it. You know, I was petrified climbing in, but there was something that enabled me to go beyond that fear, you know, like to continue. And part of it is I spent a lot of money on that pilot boat. You know, I was there, I'd got my support team on the boat. I wasn't about to say, do you know what, guys, I'm really scared. I'm not going to do this. That just was, that just wasn't about to happen. But I was terrified. But I'm so glad I did swim because it was one of the most beautiful swims of my life. You know, it's like this indigo blue water, you know, swimming to California. Like, how cool is that? You know?
Exactly.
And I could have let the fear get the better of me. And what would it have gained? You know, like in hindsight, you know, you might say, oh, you weren't eaten by the shark. If you'd been eaten by the shark, you'd say something different.
Or lost a limb.
I think, I think Steven Spielberg has a lot to answer for this. I think people's perception of sharks has been heavily impacted by a certain film. But
I think tiger
anyway,
and bull
what I
shark
was
are
going
the
to ask,
ones,
yeah, exactly. What I was going to ask you, because I drifted into the world of comparing sharks, different types of sharks. Going back to kind of how you said about that momentum, getting that ball moving, the exercising the muscle. What do you think is, and this is not an easy question, I think, to answer, but I thought I'd pick your brain to get an understanding of this. Well, if it is in, you know, most people's locker to do this stuff, what is holding them back, I suppose, from it may not necessarily be swimming the Catalina Channel, but you know, getting outside of their comfort zone. What do you see is the thing that holds people back, I suppose, the most in this area?
I suppose it's called our comfort zone for a reason. It is comfortable, isn't it? Like doing things which put us outside that level of comfort and familiarity is challenging, and the path of least resistance is often to just stay within it, whether that's, you know, staying in our social group of friends that we're comfortable with, they know us. It's a lot easier to spend an evening with them than go and meet some new people. You know, it might be sticking to a job where you've been doing it a few years, you've got all your contacts, you're happy picking up the phone and talking to them because, you know, you're comfortable. And I suppose it's exposing yourself to some degree of fear, you know, and of course everything is, you don't want to take risks. You know, there needs to be some level where you're calculating the risk and reward. You know, you don't want to like quit your job and do everything and say, do you know what, I'm going to just do everything, so I'm just outside this comfort zone. But I think there are some areas where I think it's just really easy to get stuck because it's where we feel comfortable and safe. And I think it's quite a human response to kind of want safety. I think it's one of our real core needs is to feel safe. And some of these situations I've been in, of course, I've felt very unsafe, but then there comes a reward from having done that and this sense of accomplishment. And it's Yeah, it's hard because it can take many forms, because it might not be in sport, it might be in, some professional pursuit, or, personal life, but doing, trying new sports or doing different things. It's coming out of this familiarity, and, it can be hard, but then that comes often with a great reward. But you almost have to do it to experience that, to sense that, to understand what the point is in pushing yourself outside the comfort zone. But it's definitely where the magic has happened for me. It's where my personal growth, my kind of accomplishments that I'm really proud of, that I really, the sort of things that make me smile when I think about, they're all things where I was so far out of my comfort zone. I was well beyond it. But I just imagine a parallel universe where I didn't take those risks and I didn't step outside it, and I wouldn't have lived a life with anywhere near the richness, not just, the accomplishments on paper, but the people I've met, the connections I've made, the places I've been, the experiences that I've had. And I'd also stress that it's often the when I didn't achieve what I set out to do, like when I didn't make it around Tyree, I was broken, but the farmers, they invited me to go and celebrate with them, because it was the day of the year where all the sheep go to the mainland on the ferry to market, so they all make their money. And they have this huge all-night party, and they invited me like as the guest of honor, this kind of crazy woman who'd come to attempt. They couldn't believe that I'd managed to swim 22 miles of it. And I'd have never had that experience had I not put myself out there and done something that felt really, really hard.
I suppose a question that jumps into my head, you mentioned about risk-taking, things like that. Are you a natural risk taker in the rest of your life, or do you focus that risk taking, say, into the swimming? Or do you see what I mean? Is it
I'm
the
a
whole
mixture.
package?
Yeah, I am. I'm a bag of contradictions, I think. I suppose I've got a track record for sort of setting up businesses and projects and things that are not going with the flow. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like doing things. But I do really appreciate the, like the sort of safety and comfort of being with my network of friends and being in my home. For a number of years, I've lived between Mallorca and the UK, so sort of spending part of the year in both places. And that, it can be exhausting, like, living in two countries with all the kind of stresses that come with that. But there's part of me that thinks it's just a really great way to live, that you can be part of two different cultures. And, I've got really wonderful friends in both places. And I guess and it ebbs and flows like the sea. There are times when I feel I've got the energy to really go out and do these things. Other times I really haven't at all. And I kind of retreat to, I guess, my comfort zone, and where I feel safe and protected, and it's never a constant. So I have a kind of a bit of both, really.
So, that's good to hear. That is good to hear.
We've had another guest on who'd been an elite performer in martial arts, and he said once he'd achieved something, he couldn't really enjoy the moment as much as he wanted to, because it was the next thing. Do you experience that as well, or do you get to enjoy the high of your achievement for a little bit longer?
I used to be like that. I used to always be going for the next, like, the tougher swim, the longer swim, like this need. I think it was always this sense of need to prove myself. Like I couldn't just, like kind of appreciate what I'd done, like I really, and that's exhausting actually, to be in that cycle. And I think it's actually becoming a parent has made a big difference there. I think I don't feel that need to go out and prove myself. I've also got a different approach to the risk. I think as a mum, it feels very different. And I'm not sure I would ever push myself to the limits I've pushed myself previously, because, you know, there's someone who really needs me to be here. And that gives me a very different perspective. And I haven't tested it yet. You know, it's my last major swim was the Catalina Channel the year before she was born. And I'm just not sure that that drive is there, and that kind of, you know, taking that level of risk, because, you know, what you have to question, what is that for? Like, what is it you're trying to prove to yourself or others? And is it worth what the cost could be, you know? And I always have, you know, the best possible safety in place. You know, we've got, you know, I'm not doing anything reckless, but at the same time, when you're doing, you know, really challenging things, really sort of pushing the limits in extreme environments, there are inevitable risks with doing that. And I think I've lost that need to prove myself. You know, I think I feel I'm enough, you know, I'm enough just as I am. It's lovely to be able to sit on a plane next to someone and look down at the English Channel or the Isle of Wight and think, I've swum around that, you know, over the Strait of Gibraltar. You know, it's brilliant, and it gives you like this inner glow, knowing that as a result of your hard work and determination, you've done those things. But I don't think it means you've got to just keep doing them like again and again. I think there are different challenges in life, and, you know, parenting is a massive challenge, and in many ways more demanding than any of the things that we've spoken about. You know, like there's a lot I've brought from my experience as an endurance swimmer into being a mom and coping with, you know, the parenting through, you know, through the pandemic on my own. It was really tough, really tough. And there are times where it felt much tougher than being, you know,
in those
in the water
jellyfish,
being stung for 10 hours. You know, I'd have given my back teeth to swap places. But it is, I guess, all these life experiences kind of show us something about ourselves and give us a little bit of something to draw upon when we're facing other challenges at other points in life.
Yeah, because the thing I wrote down here, is there a ranking in elite swimmers? You know, so, you know, is there a group of you that have some sort of league table? And that was, is there a motivation to go, I've slipped down to 5th now, I need to get back above Jenny from Oslo or whatever it is?
It's so it's funny. There are some lists that people create, so that are like lists of swims. So, for example, there's a list called the Ocean 7, and it's a list of 7 kind of iconic swims around the world. But I've never really kind of paid a lot of attention. Some swimmers, it's their kind of mission. They want to do them. Some have tried to do it all in a year. I think last year, actually, a guy did do them all in 1 year. But I guess I'm just the sort of person, I just kind of dance to the beat of my own drum. I'd much rather go out there and swim some uncharted territory, or do a swim where I find it fascinating for some reason, some history, or whatever it might be. You know, swimming around the Isle of Wight. I lived just across from the island. I knew it hadn't been done for 30 years. Like, for me, that's far more like an interesting challenge than going and like ticking these boxes that someone else has created the list. And it's interesting because there's a kind of like a record kept of ranking of people and how many of them, and I'm on that list because I think I've done 4 of them, but it's not by design. It's got nothing to do with the fact that they're on that list that I've gone and swam them, but I am, you know, I'm sitting on that list. But that's not why I swim at all. It's very much a a personal challenge about me learning about myself and what I'm capable of. And there's no element that I'm competing with another person or trying to do more or, like tick lists. It's just not for me what it's all about.
Yeah.
But obviously with that in mind, and I'm being a bit crafty here, but looking at the list of where you have swum, is there many other swimmers in the UK that have done as much of this sort of swimming, or are you one of the leading lights, would you say, in the UK or in the world for that matter?
Do you know, it's hard to say because, like I say, I don't really track where I rank. I guess I have done quite a like a really wide range of different swims in different parts of the world, and I think, I'm a member of what's known as the 24-hour club, which is people who've completed a swim of more than 24 hours non-stop. And I can't remember how many people are on that list, but it's not a lot of people. It's quite a select group that are
exclusive
on there.
club, obviously.
It is. It really is. And if you don't complete the swim, you don't make it. So say if you're attempting a swim and you swim for 27 hours, but you don't finish whatever the swim is, you don't get on the list, which always seems a bit cruel to me because you've still swam for more than 24 hours. But yeah, so yeah, it's hard to say, but for me, it's all about the experiences and the kind of. I used to work for Robin Knox Johnston, who was the first man to sail solo non-stop around the world, and he's an amazing man, and he always talks about painting your life in bright colours, and he's living the most amazing life, and he still does loads of sailing now in his 80s. And I just think we have choices of how we choose to live. We've got so many options these days of how we live, and I just feel like I've grasped loads of opportunities, when they've presented themselves, and I've really, as much as I can, like gone out there and done the things that have kind of inspired me, and I love the connections and network that I've built up of some like incredibly inspiring people who've, done other things in swimming and other spheres, which has made my life so rich. It's kind of looking back on some of the things. I sailed around the world in the Clipper Around the World yacht race myself in 2002. It was an 11-month circumnavigation, so that's 20 years ago now. But, that in itself was phenomenal. That experience of, sailing just under the power of the wind, 38,000 miles, it was just incredible. And yeah, like long may it last, I think, living like that. And some of the people, the crew on the Hong Kong Clipper that I sailed around the world with, they're just some of my closest friends, in the world. We sailed through some, everything you can imagine over 11 months around the world, everything from the doldrums to, storm force winds, ice on deck, all sorts of things went on along the way. And the bond that you develop with those people, you again have had each other's lives in your hands, and that it creates a kind of a bond and closeness that, it's hard to even explain what that's like. And I've been lucky enough to develop those sort of bonds through the sailing and through swimming. And that's really precious. That's something, probably the best thing in a way to come out of all this.
Do you think your experience with when you did the round the world race, do you think that was and you may not think of it at the time, but was that a stepping stone to then onto the swimming? Or
it was. What happened doing that race showed me again what I could achieve, because prior to that, I'd sailed a little bit as a child with my family. My dad loved the sea, but I literally, like, as an adult, I was in my mid-20s and I hadn't, since I was a child, been on on a boat. So I think it just showed me what I could do if I set my mind to it, and being surrounded by other people who kind of didn't see barriers to just going out and like, doing stuff. So, after the race finished, a couple of people rowed across the Atlantic. Someone was climbing Everest, half, loads of people were going and climbing Kilimanjaro. And so then it becomes really normal to say, oh, I'm going to swim the English Channel, because you're surrounded. And I think that's so important in life, isn't it? Who you surround yourself by.
Oh, exactly.
It really influences how you view the world, what you do yourself. And I think for me, that was really fundamental. The people that I met and became close to, it definitely influenced what I went on to do. And I suppose I've always had this drive, and it's how I met Simon, to kind of to make a difference in the world, and I was always fundraising through the swims that I was doing, and I was raising money for mental health charities and the Samaritans. And so my dad died by suicide when I was 9, and I wanted to, through the swimming, initially I was raising money, and then more and more I was into kind of try to break down some of the stigma. And, I'd always felt growing up, it was so hard to talk about what had happened and the fact that I had lost my dad to suicide. And so I'm more and more, when I was doing the media interviews about the swims, I would talk about what the motivation was and raising money for the charities. And I guess over the years, I've kind of pivoted more and more into that world, and that's why I set up Luna. The Luna Foundation in 22 was to kind of really change and transform the support that's available for children who lose a parent to suicide, because I knew from my own experience that it was lacking. And I did a Churchill Fellowship research project. I was awarded this opportunity to go to different parts of the world to visit organizations who support children and young people after suicide. And I saw all the great work they were doing. And so I came back, published my report, which is called Time to Count. And I published that at the end of 21, and then set up Luna to basically create the change that I was mapping out in this report. And so I guess I've morphed from doing my challenges in the water to kind of being more of an advocate for children bereaved by suicide and founding Luna. And that's how I met Simon last year when I was speaking at a conference in Kent about the work that we were doing. I think it was literally a month or two after Luna had been founded. It was very, very early. But it's, I guess my mission and my focus, it feels still very much in a way the same, but it's maybe just how I'm going about it has changed a bit over the years. But it's kind of handy when you're a parent, because it's not very easy kind of nipping off to do a 26-hour swim here and there, is it?
But do you think, if, say, and we're speaking hypothetically here, if you'd set up Luna, say, before you started swimming, or say you never even went down that angle of swimming, do you think, looking back over that now and what the skills you've learned, things like that, do you think you're better equipped to do what you want to achieve with Luna, with all of that? It's not just the swimming, but the organisation skills you've learned. It's the whole
I think so. I think also, I think it's really helpful to have a strong story behind what you do. In the not-for-profit world, there are so many organizations out there, and actually having a really clear why, why it is you do what you do, and sharing that with people in a compelling way. I think that's so important, because it gets people to really kind of take on board why it's important. We at Luna, we deliver training for professionals who work with children and young people to better equip them to provide support after suicide bereavement. And Simon is one of our trainers, and it's brilliant working with him. And for me, being able to like share my story, why it's important, like that is, I just think it makes Luna all the stronger. And now we've got other people like Simon and others in our lived experience network who then share their stories. And it's kind of, it feels like a movement, it feels like a movement for change. And I think having had my experience swimming, and that felt in a way like a movement, it was like building this team, fundraising for the charities. It was quite a major mission, kind of that running that kind of international swimming campaign. And I suppose it's great now to be able to use those transferable skills to build an organization that I hope will outlive me, that will be here in years to come, ensuring that children, who go through what I went through as a child get the support they need, and they get the support so that we can kind of change their outcomes for the better. We want to like break these cycles of poor mental health in children that experience parental suicide. And it feels like it's a challenge for me, because running an organization comes with huge challenges, but it feels like one of the most meaningful things that I've done, because it feels like it will definitely outlive me and my involvement, because I'd love to live in a world where Luna didn't have to exist, but sadly there will be children bereaved by suicide, and we just need to make sure that they are well looked after and that they get the support they need, and that people who work with children feel kind of confident and equipped to provide support, because I think it can put people in a situation that they want to do the right thing, but they just don't know what that is. They don't know what they should or shouldn't say, and that can often result in people saying nothing at all, and that in itself can be really, really detrimental. It like reinforces the stigma and this sense that it's something to be really ashamed of, and that can have a really major impact on mental health for them as they grow up. So it's a big mission, but it's I feel like we are making good progress. We're not quite 2 yet, but we've still got a long way to go.
I suppose this is a good junction to ask the question of, if we will have people listen to this, that Luna sounds like an organisation they would want to connect with. What's the best way for our listeners to firstly find out more, but also if they want to get in touch as well?
Yeah, so the best place to find out about Luna is on our website, and our website is at teamluna.org. And on there's information about the training that we offer for people who work with children and young people. It's worth noting we don't provide any direct support for families, children and young people who have been bereaved by suicide. But we do, so our focus is on producing helpful guides, which can be accessed through the website. So there are guides for families and professionals, and our training. We also have our lived experience network. So anybody who's themselves lost a parent to suicide and want to kind of use their experience to create change for others, to kind of be part of our mission and help shape the work that we're doing, there's information about joining the Lived Experience Network on the website. We're also on all the main social media platforms. So you can find Luna on LinkedIn, on X, Facebook and Instagram. So for anybody interested in the work that we're doing, do have a look and connect with us, because the more people who are involved in the mission, it's a huge mission, and we want to make sure that as many people as possible are on board with us.
And we'll add all of those points of contact onto the show notes as well, so everyone can find them.
fabulous. That'd be
And
great.
I think the resource hub as well, Anna, that you've compiled is amazing for anyone who just wants to get some source of information. There's so much rich stuff on there because they might not really know where to turn to, but they go to that resource hub, they'll find books, they'll find videos, they'll find lots of great articles that can help them, if they just want something to start that conversation with a young person. So I think people should check out the website, especially the resource hub, because that's getting better and growing all the time because you're always adding new things
organic. To it. Exactly, and all the time we're we encourage people, if they've found some resource, some book, some guide, something they've found helpful that isn't there, to let us know. There's a submission form in the hub, and then we want to make sure that it is a kind of a place where you can find a whole range of stuff. And for a lot of people, they might have experienced as a child losing their mum or dad to suicide, and it might be something that's been packed away for years and they haven't really talk to anyone about it, and they might just want to look on there and look at some of the different things. There's some documentaries and all sorts of things in there that it's just a way to bring it all together. And it's an area where there's been so much taboo, stigma around having the conversation. So that's a big part of what we're doing, is trying to break that down.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the clock, and I know when we started,
I'm afraid
you've got to dash off. But I just want to say it's been amazing, and again, such a rich experience listening to how someone in elite swimming, goes just through the whole process of getting something off the ground. And where you started from, I didn't know. I thought you had some sort of background in swimming and had swam for the county or England.
No.
To go, right, that's it. I'm going to swim the channel and then start teaching yourself front crawl. It's just been so great to listen to how you've gone so far.
It's incredible.
I'm really looking forward to continuing my involvement with Luna as well as it grows and develops, and playing a small part in trying to share the training with as many people as possible. So Anna, thank you very much for your time. And
thank you.
I'm sure David would like to just chip in with that as well.
Yeah, as I say, it's incredible. Not the whole thing was incredible. The swimming, what you've just discussed with Luna and stuff, it's all very, very inspiring. So thank you very much for sharing it with us, but also giving up your time. There will be people listening to this that will find all of it fascinating. I guarantee it. And as I say, we'll share all your, how people can find out more about you and Luna. And I have a feeling there will be people getting in touch, because what you've described from start to finish has been inspiring.
I'll just a quick plug before I go. So I know
please do.
So I am a speaker, keynote speaker, and I do, I speak in companies, organizations, conferences, and there's various things coming up, like International Women's Day. There's Children's Mental Health Awareness Week. So I'm out speaking around those things. So if anybody wants to get in touch about potentially booking me to come and speak in your organization or your company, do get in contact. That would be great, and we can chat about that.
Is that best through your website, or what's the best way for them to come to you?
Is my website at annawardley.com. It's nice and easy. So it's my name, annawardley.com, and there's a contact form in there, and I can get back to you and chat about anything in relation to that, because it's something that I really enjoy doing, and I speak about kind of a range of things, but lots of the things that we've touched on today. And I always work with people to kind of tailor to their particular audience and organization to make sure it's relevant. But please do feel free to get in touch if anybody is interested.
And there will be a link as well with all the other stuff in the show notes. So if anyone's struggling to find your site, they can just click the link. So
brilliant.
I couldn't think of someone else I'd really, just what you've told us already. I think speaking at an event or anything, it'd be a reason to go if you were speaking. So
thank you. I love doing it. I always think the things in life that you love doing, you should do more of, because it's often the things that we're best at and people get the most from. So rather than sometimes slogging away at the stuff we don't enjoy and we find difficult, actually like lean into the stuff that you love doing. And for me, speaking and sharing my kind of story, my experiences, is something that I really love doing. So I should take a leaf out of my own book and do more of it.
Yeah,
but it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. I think it's great whenever I record a podcast like this. It's such a lovely experience to get a period of time to reflect on your life, because I think with our busy lives now, it's very rare that you actually sort of step back and take the long view. And I think we should all do it more often, because it gives you some really good perspective and reminds you, of like where you've come from and like what you've achieved. And I think in the day to day, it's often easy to lose that and kind of feel quite bogged down in whatever the sort of day to day problems of the day are. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Anna. And you better get in that car quick.
Yes, or I'll be in trouble. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.